Move now to Deputy Catherine Murphy, co-leader of the Social Democrats.
Thank you. Taoiseach, my office has been, like everyone else's, has been receiving lots of calls and emails since the news about reverting to the traditional Leaving Cert for this year was leaked last night. Students and parents are extremely anxious, confused, and many of them are angry about what has been announced, but just as importantly, in how it was announced or how it happened. One parent told me that their child has lost almost all of their resource hours because of the pandemic, and she's extremely distressed at today's news. Many are similarly upset. Taoiseach, as a former secondary school teacher yourself, you know that the Leaving Cert is a 2-year exam and that the curriculum covers those 2 years. And this year's cohort of Leaving Cert have not had 2 years to prepare. There have been lengthy school closures. We know about, obviously through illness with both teachers and pupils, and indeed being close contacts. In addition, students whose education was seriously disrupted because of COVID did not experience the pandemic equally. Those ones who were lucky enough to have remote teaching and perhaps even grinds during lockdowns don't compare with others who didn't even have broadband or a tablet to keep up with coursework. Just last week, Taoiseach, 2 separate reports from the Children's Ombudsman and the Special Rapporteur on Child Protection emphasised while school closures had a negative impact on all children, they disproportionately impacted on disadvantaged and marginalised children. Today's announcement heaps further disadvantage onto that. I heard the Minister for Education speaking earlier, and she said that she'd abandoned the hybrid system because she didn't feel it would be as fair as last year. But fair to who, Taoiseach? I think there must be a genuine effort to recognise the impact that COVID has had over the last 2 years, but also a genuine effort other than tinkering with exam papers in terms of what the solution should be. And none of us believe that this is straightforward or easy. Was the hybrid system ever on the table during those consultations, Taoiseach? Was it? Given that we've known for the last 2 years that 25% of Leaving Cert students didn't sit a junior cert, was there contingency measures being considered or put in place, in the last 12 months? And how can you claim that the Leaving Cert will be fair this year, given that we all know about the disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on marginalised and disadvantaged students?
Well, first of all, it is about that very point of fairness. And if one had proceeded on historic profiling to get an accredited grade system, that would have even disadvantaged students even more than is the case now. Students were very concerned by a number of things. One was grade inflation, and that they would be compared to last year's results and outcomes in terms of grade inflation last year. The Minister has met that concern through the marking scheme and the standardisation that will apply here. The students of 2022 will not receive lower grades in the aggregate as opposed to 2021. And so that grade inflation issue has been met. And the State Examination Commission, working with the Minister, have worked on that option. That's an important, or on that issue, sorry, which was an important issue in terms of progression to further education, third level education, apprenticeships and so on, which is an important consideration once students have finished their Leaving Certificate. The choice is not tinkering with the exam. Like cutting the content by a third is not tinkering. Reducing the content of each paper by over a third is not tinkering. These are very radical changes that will give significant choice to students, not just in terms of sitting and answering questions. There will be reduced questions and more options, but also in terms of the study on specific syllabus that you'll have to do and on your revision as well. And the same applies to the oral and the practicals. And as you know, the oral and the practicals are not now taking place are taking place during the holiday time now, so as to make sure that they don't lose school time. But there will be, for example, in the oral Irish, the SHRAP Victoria is halved from 20 to 10. So these are significant changes that will help students to take account of what you have correctly said has been a very challenging 2 years for this cohort of students. It has been a very challenging 2 years. And so the papers they will be sitting and the orals that they will be participating in and the practicals, the burden will be reduced significantly to take account of the challenges that this year's students have had to face. On the accredited grades, it was looked at. It was on the table. And the Minister and her officials in particular, it's a very complex issue that can't be wished away either. The whole accredited grades system, very, very complex and very, very challenging. And when you add into the situation this year, the fact that 25% of the students didn't sit the junior certificate. And people might say, well, they did a completion certificate and so on. Not all teachers gave grades in those completion certificates. So that wouldn't have been available either as a mechanism to be used in an accredited grades system. To a large extent, they were running out of options when it came to an alternative accredited grade system, primarily because of that 25% of the cohort who didn't do the junior cert.
Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach, the two reports, the Children's Ombudsman and the Special Rapporteur on Child Protection, really did emphasise the point about all children being impacted, but the ones that were most impacted were disadvantaged and marginalised. Where did that come into the thinking in relation to what has been presented? Where are they specifically represented? What about the parent who contacted me this morning about their child who didn't get resource hours and will never get those resource hours back? You know, and that is about charting that course for a student to get to Leaving Cert, who may not have an ambition to go to college. It is an achievement to get the Leaving Cert. Where is that factored in? Because there is a real significant issue in terms of the assessment for those children and for students who didn't have, for example, access to broadband or a tablet. I mean, we all remember the discussions that were being had where whole families were relying on accessing information on a mobile phone.
Thank you, Deputy.
And people sharing devices. That was this cohort as well. Where is that going to be recognised specifically in this? Where's the choice for that cohort?
Thank you, Deputy.
First of all, I do acknowledge the reports of the Ombudsman and the Special Rapporteur, and in terms of their conclusions and observations in respect of children and students from certain backgrounds without the access to technology or for other factors, that the impact that the pandemic had on them was particularly profound. What has to in terms of the Leaving Cert applied, not all students do the Leaving Certificate applied, but that the cohort doing the Leaving Cert applied, the scaling factor there is applied to the written papers, for example, was increased from 1.5 to 1.25. So in all papers that the various variety of cohorts will be doing, there will be adjustments made to take account of the challenges that they faced. That is why, for example, we were determined in January to reopen the schools. For a large period of last year, around this time, the schools were closed. We were in level 5 completely. So the adjustments are very significant. Cutting by a third the content of most papers will give wide choice. And also the fact that the standardisation will ensure that there won't be that disadvantage as compared with those who completed last year.